You got a good rider, a good woman with you by your side. You don't cheat on her.
And then feel sorry for them because I was a crack dealer with a heart of gold.
You was 18.
Walmart think they done me. They think they done paying me.
For over 20 years, Tracy Morgan has been more than just a funny man. He's been a live wire of pure energy on stage. From Saturday Night Live to blockbuster films, he built a career that most could only dream of. But then, something happened that no one ever expected.
You want to know something about somebody else? You learn to shut up. Because they can't wait to tell you what their intent is with you, what their plans are with you, how they plan on treating you. But be patient, just be quiet and listen.
Years of public ridicule and pressure for not fitting into Hollywood's perfect image started to take a toll, and whispers of lawsuits and pain followed close behind. Behind the bright lights and laughter, Tracy was fighting invisible battles that were far darker than the world could see. The depression that followed became heavier than Hollywood politics itself. And then came the horrific accident, the one that left doctors saying, "Prepare for the worst." That moment changed everything. Friends close to Tracy confessed he was no longer the same. His spark, that larger-than-life personality, seemed dimmed.
That's crazy though.
What could possibly break down a man known for turning pain into laughter? Who was the real Tracy Morgan hiding behind the jokes and smiles that fooled the whole world into believing he was okay? Why does everything surrounding Tracy seem wrapped in mystery, covered in a silence that feels almost unbreakable? The truth, raw, emotional, and heartbreaking, is finally coming to light. Tracy Jamal Morgan's story begins on November 10th, 1968 in Brooklyn, New York. Born in the rough public housing of Bedford-Stuyvesant, his early world was filled with the sounds of honking cars, heated arguments, and police sirens instead of calm morning birds. His father, James Morgan Jr., a Vietnam War veteran, named him after a fallen friend. Despite his own pain, James sparked comedy in Tracy's heart with his clever, quick wit, just like Richard Pryor's. Tracy still remembers sitting on his father's lap at just 4 years old, hearing laughter fill the room after one of his dad's jokes. It was the moment that lit his comedic soul forever.
And my father fell to his knees and started crying, snot bubbles, and then he just apologized, kept apologizing. "I'm sorry, Tracy, I'm sorry." I grabbed him around the head, and I said, "It's okay, Dad."
Tracy once said, "I was too young to understand why they were laughing, but that feeling made me want to try again and again and again." That spark never left him. Making people smile became the first real gift he ever learned to give. As he grew older, he discovered something that every teenager dreams of. Being funny could make you stand out. When you could make people laugh, even in the toughest corners of Brooklyn, it meant everything. In a neighborhood filled with poverty and violence, humor wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. For Tracy, every joke, every laugh was proof that he mattered. But sadly, the light that inspired him most, the one from his father, wouldn't shine forever.
And from that day, that night, he kept looking in I would be in my room sleep. He would open my door 20 times a night to make sure I'm okay. Then he would come in there, he started coming in, and he would sit on the floor, and my head would be right here, and he would whisper in my ear, "You're gonna be great."
When Tracy was only 6 years old, his dad walked away, leaving behind a space no amount of laughter could fill. That loss stayed with him, silent but heavy. By his senior year of high school, life hit him again with another heartbreaking truth. Tracy discovered that his father was HIV positive, a result of drug use. The same man who had once faced the chaos of war was now losing a battle to the streets he'd returned to. For a teen, it was almost unbearable to see the strong, uniformed soldier he once looked up to fall so hard. Tracy wasn't loud or outgoing in school. He was the quiet kid, often the one bullies targeted. Still, he tried to protect his mom from worry, hiding his pain behind forced smiles. But when his father's health collapsed, Tracy made a decision no teen should ever face. With only 4 credits left to graduate, he dropped out of school to take care of the man who had once made him laugh. Despite all his love and effort, nothing could stop the illness from taking its toll. When Tracy's father passed away at just 38, his whole world shattered. Suddenly, the man who once made him laugh was gone, and the word fatherless became painfully real. Poverty, which had always lurked in the background, now wrapped around the family like a dark shadow. Welfare checks barely covered the basics, and meals were so scarce that Tracy realized something had to change, or his family might not survive at all. Desperation pushed him toward choices no teen should ever face. For a short time, Tracy sold crack just to help his mom and siblings eat. But instead of relief, all he felt was shame. The same drugs that stole his father's life were now the ones he was selling. That guilt stayed buried inside him for years, haunting him even even after the world knew his name. Said even when he stood under the bright lights of Saturday Night Live or 30 Rock, he could still close his eyes and feel the fear, the humiliation, and the memory of those hard Brooklyn nights. But his pain didn't stop there. The one person who believed in him, the friend who said, "Hey Tracy, you should do stand-up comedy," was suddenly taken from him. Just a week after encouraging him to chase his dreams, that same friend was murdered. No warning, no goodbye. Tracy later said it felt like the Vietnam War of my life. From that day forward, every success carried a shadow of regret. He was alive, but his best friend wasn't. He had made it, but the person who believed in him first never got to see it. That loss became the fire that fueled his journey. Soon after, Tracy took his pain to the streets, performing raw, unfiltered comedy. And that's where his rise truly began. Tracy had no idea that the laughter which once saved his life would one day turn into the very thing used against him. Hollywood, the same place that cheered him on, began to slowly wear him down. After only a few years of chasing his dream, he realized the brutal truth. Comedy isn't easy. Tracy often said, stand-up is the loneliest job in the world. Because on that stage, you're completely alone, armed with nothing but your voice and a microphone. When a joke misses, there's no co-star to save you. No one to jump in. You either win the crowd or lose them in seconds. And if the audience doesn't like it, you'll hear the worst sounds a performer can imagine. Boos, silence, or even things being thrown right at you. Tracy faced it all. There were nights when he performed for free or even paid out of pocket just to get 5 minutes under those bright lights. That's how much he believed in his craft. But the stage was never easy for a black comedian trying to break through in an industry that didn't want to make space for him. Auditions felt like ice water thrown in his face, cold, quick, and cruel. Tracy would walk into a room and before he even spoke, the answer was already written across their expressions. Not a good fit. Not because he couldn't act, but because they wouldn't let him try. He wasn't seen as talented, just a guy from Brooklyn, someone they thought didn't fit the Hollywood mold. Once, when he asked for a small chance to perform, he began telling a heartfelt story from his childhood only for the club owner to interrupt him saying, "The audience here won't like that kind of thing." Tracy froze, then asked, "So whose story do you want me to tell?" "Someone else's." The silence that followed was his answer. He was expected to leave his own culture at the door just to be heard. Even after being turned away time and time again, Tracy never stopped performing. He took every chance he got. Small bars, rundown gyms, even open mics where only a handful of people showed up. But it was in those forgotten corners that true talent couldn't hide. Martin Lawrence, already a rising comedy star, noticed the sharp edge in every one of Tracy's jokes and knew there was something special there. Martin gave him a shot on Martin, and just like that, Tracy Morgan's name hit TV screens across the country for the very first time. But fame didn't mean freedom. Once that door opened, Tracy realized it led to another room filled with invisible walls. Being a black comedian in Hollywood came with a long list of unspoken rules. He constantly heard comments like, "Make that joke less urban," or "Don't be too street." They wanted him on screen, but only if he played it safe enough not to shake up prime time. As Tracy's fame grew, so did the pressure. Producers and executives kept piling on requests, each one pushing him further from his truth. They loved his wild energy, but they didn't understand where it came from. That madness they called entertaining was born from pain. His childhood struggles, his father's loss, and his memories of surviving the rough streets of Brooklyn. When you're forced to perform what others want instead of what's inside your heart, you start to disappear right there on stage. There were nights on the SNL set when the crowd laughed so hard just seeing him walk out, but to Tracy, it felt hollow. The bright lights blinded him, and beneath the laughter, he felt utterly alone. He once said, "When you're under that spotlight and they stop laughing, that silence can make you feel like you can't breathe." Tracy reached a turning point and decided it was time to take back his truth. He refused to become a hollow version of himself, a candy clown shaped by Hollywood's demands. No matter how big his fame got, Tracy always said it never changed who he really was. He kept his heart simple, just like in the days when nobody knew his name. But sometimes life has a way of testing even the strongest souls. And for Tracy, that test came one dark night that would change everything. On July 6, 2014, tragedy struck on the New Jersey Turnpike. Tracy and his friends were heading home from a show in Delaware when their limousine was suddenly hit by a speeding Walmart truck. The driver had gone past his work hours and was exhausted. One moment of distraction, 1 second of lost focus, and disaster exploded out of nowhere. The limo spun violently, metal screeching and glass shattering as chaos unfolded in the blink of an eye. The crash claimed the life of James McNair, Tracy's close friend and comedy partner, the man who once told him, "You were born to do this, don't give up." James never got to say goodbye. His loss hit Tracy harder than any joke ever could. Tracy survived, but barely. His body was shattered. Broken bones, a crushed leg, and severe head injuries left him clinging to life. He was rushed to the hospital unconscious, breathing through machines as flashing red and blue lights lit up the night. The news spread across the nation within hours, leaving fans in shock and heartbreak. People everywhere prayed, fearing that the man who had once made them laugh through their own pain might never stand on a stage again. The hospital room was blinding white, filled with a silence so heavy it almost echoed. Doctors stared at Tracy's CT scans for several long seconds before one of them finally spoke, and the words cut deep. He may never stand on stage again. It wasn't a warning or a guess. It was the cold truth. For Tracy, that sentence was more than medical news, it was heartbreak. The stage had never been just a job, it was where he found his voice, where he turned pain into laughter, and where he proved that life couldn't crush him the way it crushed his father. When he finally woke up, everything was blurry. White lights, sharp beeps, and an unbearable stillness. He couldn't feel his legs. He couldn't remember the crash. All he knew was that his body felt impossibly heavy, as if the world itself was pressing down on him. And then, in a weak, broken voice, he asked the question that froze the entire room. "Where's my friend? Why am I still alive and he's not?" That question hit harder than any injury. The real wounds weren't in his bones, they were in his heart. Survivor's guilt washed over him like a storm, dragging him back to the memory he had buried for years. The friend from Brooklyn who first told him, "You should do stand-up comedy." That friend was murdered a week later. Now, decades later, history had repeated itself. James McNair, the man who had stood beside him through everything, was gone too. It felt like life was playing a cruel loop, taking away the very people who believed in him the most. Tracy survived once again, but every survival came with loss. Each step toward the spotlight seemed to cast a darker, heavier shadow, and this time, no doctor could heal that kind of pain. In the days after the crash, the headlines were everywhere. Photos of the crushed limo, updates on Tracy's critical condition, reporters calling it a miracle he's alive. But what they didn't see was the quiet, brutal reality behind those hospital walls. They didn't see how Tracy tried to lift his hand and couldn't, how he broke down inside when he heard that James was gone. The painkillers dulled his body, but not his heart. The tears wouldn't fall, yet the grief was louder than ever. Bright lights terrified him now. They reminded him of that truck speeding out of the darkness. And the hardest part, he had to learn how to walk all over again. The same man who once ruled the stage with explosive energy now trembled just trying to take a single step. "Every time I stand, it hurts. Every time I move, I shake," he said quietly. Looking down at his legs, he saw not just scars, but a piece of his old life that was gone forever. America called his survival a miracle, but to Tracy, it didn't feel magical at all. It felt like a heavy reminder that he was still here to carry the pain of those who weren't. He lived to speak for the ones who couldn't anymore, smiled for the ones who once laughed beside him. That was the real tragedy. Not just that he almost died, but that he had to keep living through the loss. They called his return to comedy the miracle comeback, but if you look closer, you'd see that miracle was built from years of agony, sweat, and endless rehab. Tracy Morgan's recovery wasn't some fairy tale. It was a nightmare he had to fight through every single day just to walk, to speak, and to make the world laugh again. Tracy had to start from zero, relearning how to live, how to move, how to be again. The same feet that once owned the stage were now trembling on the thin wooden bars of a therapy room. Each step sent a jolt of pain racing through his whole body. Nurses held him steady like a child taking his first steps while he stared down at the floor, sweat dripping, breath heavy, wondering how the body that once carried him through roaring crowds could now betray him so completely. The cheers, the laughter, the flashing lights, all gone. Now there was only the creak of bones and the soft hum of hospital machines. Every time he tried to lift his leg a few inches higher, his brain, still healing, played tricks on him. His memory flickered like a broken light bulb. Some mornings Tracy woke up thinking he was backstage at SNL in 1998. Other times he'd see his daughter and for a few seconds struggle to recognize her face. He later said there were moments when he wasn't sure what was real, only drifting between half-remembered dreams and painful truth. For a comedian, memory is everything. It's rhythm, timing, and control. Losing it felt like losing his identity. Every little sound became a trigger. The screech of brakes outside his window sent shivers down his spine. The rumble of an engine behind him felt like reliving that crash all over again. Doctors called it PTSD, but for Tracy, it was more than trauma. It was a haunting. Every echo pulled him back to that night, to the loss of his friend James McNair, the man who didn't make it out. Tracy was airlifted to the hospital that night, but his friend never opened his eyes again, and that truth followed him everywhere. A silent pain that no medicine could erase. Every time Tracy looked in the mirror, the same question echoed in his mind. Why me? He learned to walk again, learned to speak again, but inside, that question burned like fire under ashes, hidden, yet slowly eating him alive. The guilt never faded. The stronger he grew in recovery, the heavier it got, as if every step forward pulled him farther from the friend he lost that night. And even his marriage couldn't escape the storm. His partner tried to stay strong, but loving someone battling both physical pain and invisible scars isn't easy. There were nights when Tracy would wake up shaking, gasping for air, his heart racing as memories flashed like lightning. During dinner, a single thought or memory could send him into tears without warning. His wife could only place a hand on his shoulder and wait for the panic to pass. But the fear never truly left. It hid quietly, waiting for moments when he was at his weakest to crawl back into his mind. When recovery becomes your whole life, it drains the strength you need for everything else, including love. And by the time Tracy looked back, the cracks had already formed. His marriage was slipping away before he even realized it. Meanwhile, the media told their version of the story. They turned his tragedy into headlines about lawsuits and dollar signs. Walmart pays millions to Tracy Morgan. That's what they focused on, the money. They made it sound like wealth could replace what he'd lost, as if cash could buy back broken bones, erased memories, or bring back a friend who died beside him. The truth was never about the numbers. It was about the silence after the laughter, the emptiness after the applause. Tracy Morgan wasn't a millionaire recovering. He was a survivor trying to piece together a life the world thought money could fix. They called him a profiteer, said he was cashing in on tragedy, but the audience didn't see the truth behind those headlines. They didn't see Tracy spending months relearning how to hold a spoon or trying to remember the path from his hospital bed to the elevator. They never saw the nights he lay awake, eyes wide open, terrified to let the room go dark because the moment he closed his eyes, the nightmare came rushing back. For years, Tracy didn't sleep through a single night. He was scared to drift off, afraid that the crash would replay in his head. The sound of metal grinding, his friend's voice calling his name before everything went silent. The world saw him return to the stage, cracking jokes and smiling like old times, but every step he took toward that spotlight came with invisible scars. Behind every laugh was a night spent fighting tears, piecing together broken memories and trying to remember who he was before the pain. Eventually, people began to understand. Tracy's laughter wasn't effortless anymore. It was something he earned through suffering, traded for a pain that few could ever carry. Fame didn't heal him. It just hid the scars so the crowd couldn't see. But Tracy felt them every single day. When Hollywood finally welcomed him back, the spotlight felt colder than ever. They called his comeback a miracle, a gift from God, proof that laughter could beat death. But Tracy knew the truth. Hollywood didn't love him. They loved his madness, his energy, the wild spark that made people forget their own pain. The curtain call might have looked beautiful to the audience, but behind it stood a man still haunted by what he'd survived. Because no matter how bright the lights shine, you can't rebuild a broken soul with a camera and a new script. The scars on Tracy's brain never fully healed. They left invisible gaps that no doctor could fix. Some days he laughs freely with everyone around him, but other days he goes completely silent, lost in emotions he can't even name. Those closest to him say it quietly, but truthfully. Tracy isn't the same anymore. The wild energy, the fearless chaos that once made him unstoppable, it's not there like it used to be. Now every laugh passes through painkillers and flashbacks before reaching the crowd. His body keeps sending warning signs, screaming that it's still hurting. Nosebleeds in the middle of shows, sudden sickness, late-night ambulance trips the public never hears about. Each one reminds him that the accident's shadow still follows him. Diabetes, a battle from his younger days, hasn't gone away either. Every day, he checks his blood sugar, tests the feeling in his feet, and then steps back on stage to make the world laugh, because that's what they expect from him. The audience only sees the smile, the jokes, the confidence. But Tracy knows the truth. Every performance costs him something. Every time the spotlight hits his face, he hides a pain that no one else can see. When he returned to television with The Last OG, it was more than a comeback. It was a piece of his soul stitched back together. The role was written just for him, inspired by his real story, and fans loved it. They said it felt like the old Tracy was back, full of heart and raw humor. But inside the industry, things were different. The whispers never stopped. Every time he faced new challenges or moments of struggle, people looked at him with doubt, waiting to see if he'd stumble again. Tracy could feel those eyes behind the camera, watching, judging, and always wondering if he'd ever truly heal. Tracy knew the truth. Hollywood never really forgives. It just stays quiet as long as you're still useful. While filming, he often looked out at the laughing crowd and felt like he was watching watching them through fogged glass. The laughter reached his ears, but not his heart. He could feel the mask everyone wanted him to wear, the wild, funny Tracy Morgan brand that made money in headlines. But behind that mask stood a different man, one forever changed by tragedy. The crash had taken the wildest part of him, the spark that once electrified SNL and filled Harlem streets with laughter. The brain injury stripped away the innocence that made his humor pure, and time slowly took the friends who once stood by his side. But the audience never saw that part. To them, he was back, fully recovered, same as before. And Tracy accepted it because, as he often said, they only remember me when I make them laugh. It wasn't arrogance, it was survival. In this industry, laughter is the only passport that keeps the doors open. Nobody saw the long hospital nights when he couldn't even remember his own name. Nobody knew about the mornings when he woke up wondering what he was still fighting for, and maybe no one needed to, because the world only wanted the jokes, not the pain behind them. That's the quiet tragedy of a comedian. He lights up rooms for everyone else while standing in his own darkness. Tracy brought laughter back to millions after nearly losing everything, but peace, that never came back with him. When the lights fade and the applause dies out, what's left isn't the larger-than-life performer, it's just Tracy Morgan, a man holding himself together, praying he doesn't fall apart once the curtain closes. Tracy Morgan still steps on stage, microphone in hand, standing the same way he has for half his life, ready to make people laugh. But his eyes tell a different story now. Gone is the fearless spark of that Brooklyn kid he once was. In its place is something deeper, wiser, and heavy with the weight of everything he survived. There's a quiet weariness in his stare, the kind that only comes from someone who's looked death straight in the face and realized every extra day is a gift from fate. Each smile he gives carries a tiny twitch at the corner of his eye, a reminder his body still remembers the crash, the sound of metal twisting in the dark, and the last call of the friend who never came back. Sometimes, when he looks out at the crowd waiting for his next joke, you can almost see it, that split second where he's reminding himself that laughter is still worth chasing. What most people don't understand is that Tracy never saw his comeback as a personal victory. To him, it wasn't about fame or redemption, it was about duty. The duty of a man who lived while others didn't. His best friend in Brooklyn gone too soon, his colleague James McNair taken in the crash, they never got their chance to say goodbye. So when Tracy repeats, "I'm not coming back strong, I'm coming back because I still owe those who couldn't," it hits harder than any punchline ever could. He doesn't perform to prove anything to the world, he performs to keep their spirits alive in every laugh that echoes through the crowd. In the Black community, Tracy Morgan stands as a quiet symbol of resilience, not flashy or loud, but powerful. His strength isn't about trophies or headlines, it's the calm, unbreakable strength of a man who's already faced the worst and still chooses to stand tall. People saw something powerful in Tracy Morgan, something beyond comedy or fame. In him, they saw the spirit of an older generation of Black men who were born into struggle, raised in chaos, and still managed to stand tall. They weren't chasing the shiny dream America sold, they were surviving because they had no other choice. Tracy never called himself an icon. He just showed up, scars visible, voice trembling, sharing his truth with a mix of pain and humor that cut deep. That honesty made him a symbol of quiet strength. He didn't roar for respect, he earned it by simply being real. His presence reminded people that strength isn't loud or perfect. Sometimes it's just showing up when life keeps trying to break you down. But when the stage lights fade and the cheers dissolve into silence, Tracy goes back to where it all began. A man alone, staring into the mirror, facing the reflection that the world never gets to see. He knows his laughter doesn't sound the same anymore. It's not sharp or wild like the young comics today. It's slower, heavier, like a side dressed up as a joke. No one blames him for it, but he still carries guilt deep inside. Not for failing, but because a part of him still believes his late friend should have been here to see it all. Every moment of joy comes tied to a thread of sadness that never truly fades. Fans feel that weight even if they can't explain it. Tracy Morgan made America laugh for decades, but much of that laughter was his way of easing his own pain. Not just from the accident or illness, but from years of pretending to be strong so everyone else could feel okay. He's living proof that sometimes the person making the whole world laugh is also the one hiding the deepest loneliness. So the final question in this journey isn't really about Tracy, it's about us. A country that laughed with him, demanded jokes from him, and turned his pain into entertainment. Did we ever stop to think about what it truly cost him? The truth is, nobody really knows. What we do know is that he survived, stood back up, and kept performing even when his body still trembled from memories too heavy to fade. He kept smiling for a world that didn't always see his pain. He made us laugh while quietly carrying the kind of hurt most people wouldn't survive. Every joke, every grin, every standing ovation came with a price only he could understand. Tracy Morgan's story isn't just about comedy, it's about endurance, heartbreak, and the strength to keep showing up even when everything inside you says stop. So here's the real question this story leaves behind. It doesn't take a lifetime to make a nation laugh, but how many tears does it take to keep smiling when the spotlight fades to black? Maybe that answer is different for everyone. But one truth will always remain. Behind every laugh, there's a story we'll never fully understand. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more deep stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.